trying to think what I've done. I've just gone to bookstores to do signings, which it was a little underwhelming when I did it because people aren't people are really there for you sometimes. And I was having so much fun because I had like a dice tower and I had like a D&D style, like whatever the number came up, you could get your different swag. But you go to people and be like, do you want some free stuff? And they're like, no, I'm okay. And you're like, what the fuck?
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Inside Comics. Today I'm super psyched. I'm joined by Jordan Bartlett. Jordan, thanks so much for being on the show.
Hi George, it's nice to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So for those of you tuning in, Jordan and I go way back. We went traveling through Europe like more than 10 years ago.
Don't age me.
Sorry. And she has gone on to become this successful novelist, having created Queen's Contest, and now the sequel, Queen's Catacombs, is coming out in March. Jordan, can you talk to us a little bit about your writing process? This is a trilogy that you're mapping out. Can you tell us a little bit about kind of planning for a trilogy?
Yes, and I like the phrase planning for a trilogy because when I wrote the first one, I was just planning to get to the finish line. I think the first novel, it felt like such a huge undertaking that you really just want to get to the end, and that was my ceiling. And it wasn't until I got to the end of that first book that I realized I had opened up a couple of cans of worms in the creation of that first kind of arc that I definitely needed to address. And so that led me to be able to develop the trilogy. I don't think that's probably how everyone does it, but I like to think that in each book, I've had one main arc that needed to be, the problem was identified and then solved, but then throughout that whole trilogy, there was a bigger arc, which very much reminds me of that wonderful TV show, Avatar: The Last Airbender. Each book has its own little arc, but then we've got that big Fire Lord Ozai battle at the end. So yeah, once I had finished the first one, then I started really thinking about, okay, if this was going to be a trilogy, I need to really flesh out what that big bad was, which was kind of alluded to in the first book, but also how do I make that middle book not feel like a filler episode or like just I'm leading to something big. So what was really key to build and confront in that second book?
That makes sense. Yeah, I've started, so I write comic books on Inside Comics here, and I've kind of made like this like promise to myself, like going forward, that I'm not going to start hiring an artist until I've written my mini-series completely, because I've gotten excited. I write like this like first issue, it's like really cool, and then I hire an artist, and then I'm like, wait a minute, where am I going with this thing? So now I try and like, you know, make sure it's written completely, all like, you know, 4 or 5 issues, or at least I've got like a roadmap. And it sounds like when you were writing issue novel 2, you really had novel 3 in mind quite a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and it was interesting too because writing the second one, you're constantly thinking, okay, is this a thread that I'm going to leave loose to then address in the finale? Is this a thread that I'm going to address in this book? Or is this one of those annoying threads that a reader's going to be like, well, whatever happened to this plot point or this character? And how do I minimize those so we don't kind of get to the end and think this doesn't feel like an end? And actually, once I finished writing the second book, I went through and I identified all my main characters and all of the things that needed to be resolved given how I wrote it in the second one. And it was this very long document. I was like, no, what's the third one going to be if not just answering all my questions I posed?
That's very cool. So you've developed these characters through multiple novels now. When you were first coming up with them, did you kind of like make like a list of like their attributes and their descriptions, and did you flesh that out, or did you just kind of come to you as you were writing?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think most characters were a little different depending on the kind of character they were, how important they were for the story, and the future I saw for them. So my main characters I very much had, before I started writing, very fleshed out, kind of like you would create a Dungeons and Dragons character, where you have like their strengths, their weaknesses, their ideals, their bonds, and you kind of flesh out what's going to make that character tick. I know it was very helpful, especially because I have two point of view characters in the first novel, so Connor and Jax, and they both needed to have a voice or else their chapters weren't going to sound distinct. Whereas the side characters, it was a little bit more, I think I focused more on, so they were introduced and then I had what was their guiding trait. So for example, Anya is the daughter of a florist and she's in love with Dame, Lena Glaura. But because of their different stations in life, Anya is really driven by pride and defending that pride. And anytime there is a situation where her lower status is kind of called into the forefront of everyone's mind, she gets quite defensive. And so then I've got this main guiding characteristic for her. And from there, I found her character grew, if that makes sense. So yeah, I think it really depends on the character.
So right now you're living in Europe. You're Canadian. Well, you're because how do you call it?
I'm a Canadian Kiwi hybrid.
Yes. But right now you're living in Europe for the year, and I'm wondering if like traveling to these different locations, the castles and such, and the churches are kind of inspiring your writing.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I think especially because in the sequel we get more time spent inside a castle. I spent a lot of time in castles to really get the sense of the size, because I think when you're not used to, I mean, Canada really doesn't have castles. We've got a hotel that looks like a castle in the town that I'm from, Banff, but you really need to get a sense of, when I'm in the main hall, how grand is it? How small do I feel? Or are rooms smaller than you think they're going to be? Is it bigger on the inside or is it smaller on the inside? I think that really helped, just spatial awareness of castles. But also the sequel spends a lot of time in underground tunnels and catacombs and crypts, and it's a little bit darker. So I was very fortunate to go to Paris and see their catacombs. I'm currently in Edinburgh, so I'm spending way too much of my money visiting their dungeons and their kind of underground city tours. But all of that has been really valuable research, I'd say, because then when I can write it, I really get that sense of, yes, I've been here. I know how it smells, I was going to say tastes, but I don't go around licking walls. So.
Can you tell me about Queen's Contest and Queen's Catacombs? What is this world that you're building, and why should the people that are watching this video right now go and pick up your books?
Oh, you should just read it, because I put my heart and soul into it. But basically the first one centers around two main characters. We have Jax, whose full name is Jacqueline Tabert, and Connor, whose full name is Cornelius Freyan, and they live in a split level queendom. So Jax is the inventor's apprentice, and she wants to just know what it's like to be in the upper realm. Whereas Connor, he's secretly a prince, because we love a secret prince. He wants to know what life is like in the lower realm. And something terrible happens, I can't say what, but the next ruler must be decided through a contest called Contest of Queens, hence the title, Contest of Queens. And Jax in her lower realm has been oppressed and silenced defy the powers that be in the upper realm for long enough, and she has to devise a way, not only how she's supposed to get up the cliff into the upper realm, but how she's supposed to compete in the contest and hopefully win the crown to give her people a voice. So that's the first one. And if you are wary of spoilers for the first one, I would recommend stopping listening, because in the second one, she's queen, ta-da! But it's not the solution that she thought it would be, and she's faced with a lot more kind of reality. Whereas the first one, she's very idealistic, like, if I were queen, I would make all these changes and everything would be happy. But in the sequel, it's how do we put that into practice, and what are the strings that are puppeteering our little queen, and how can we either sever them or get them to work for us? So another very special thing about this world that I'm very proud of is that it is set in a matriarchy, not in a we defeated the patriarchy and therefore it's just woman is the default. So I got to explore a lot of really interesting aspects of just gender roles, gender norms, and how power will affect everybody regardless of gender, and what does that look like when a woman in power is corrupt or a woman in power is able to lead through kindness. So
that's amazing. Yeah, I read the book. You're actually really kind enough to send it to me early on before you were published, and I got to check it out. And then now it's been picked up by a publisher. It's in bookstores everywhere, guys. It's a fantastic series, and I recommend everyone go and pick it up. I've included a link to a place where you can buy the book. So go ahead and click that link and pick it up. So what's next for you? You've got a third chapter. Is that a year away? Like, I know book 2 is coming out like in March, so it's brand new. But
International Pie Day.
Yes. But then volume 3 next year? Or are we waiting a long time?
Yeah, no, not long at all. So I've actually finished the first draft of the third one, and I've sent it to my beta readers. So I'm waiting to get that back, and then I'll send it to my publisher. So hopefully it'll definitely be out 2024. Hopefully it'll be out summer 2024, but watch this space because it's coming. You only have to wait a year. So read the first 2 slowly. That's
great. Yeah, sometimes it can be so painful when you start a series and you love it and you love these characters, and then you gotta wait like 5 years, 10 years for them to wrap up the series, if they ever do, right?
Or like Patrick Rothfuss. I love the man, but 10 years is too long to wait for Doors of Stone.
That's great. Yeah, so start picking up Queen's Contest and Queen's Catacombs. Yeah, right away.
Well, and I have to say too, George, you're kind of this huge inspiration for me, because I remember when I sent you the first draft of Contest of Queens, it was you who said, listen, it's great, however, we need to catch the readers sooner. And so if you read the first chapter, that first sequence, who I named one of the characters after your beautiful daughter in honor of that, is really there because you were like, you got to kick it up a notch and get people wanting to read this book sooner. So thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Jordan, I want to thank you for being on Inside Comics. It was really nice to see you again. And until next time, peace.